Giants and Seahawks are playing on Monday Night Football, and I'm about to break down all the best ways to help you guys make some money playing DFS in both DraftKings and FanDuel for tonight's contest using the help of the Sims tool we have over at Stokastic.com. As you guys are watching this, do me a favor. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video. If you're watching on Twitter, like the post. And also, if you want access to all the tools that we have for football over at Stokastic.com, I've got a link included below. Everything's included in our football package, from player projections, ownership projections, to stuff like our contest generator and Sims tool I'm going to be covering in this video and using it to build out some lineups. So I've already got lineups built for DraftKings, and in the same video, I'm going to be building FanDuel lineups as we go here. So let's start by looking at the top lineups that I have, favorite the top 150. And breakdown of my number one overall lineup. This is by simulated ROI in our Sims tool. So number one overall lineup here that's expected to be the most profitable. One thing of note that I find interesting here, actually leaves $3,400 in salary on the table. That's definitely one of the ways that we could be getting unique tonight, is by leaving salary on the table. As far as the construction of the lineup, it's Geno Smith in the captain spot with DK Metcalf, Gary Brightwell, Tyler Lockett, Will Dissly, and Daniel Jones. So Gary Brightwell, one of the reasons that he looks like a good value, at least for tonight's contest, is Saquon Barkley not expected to play again. And then Gary Brightwell did play a pretty decent role in the passing game for the Giants last week in the absence of Saquon Barkley, relative to a one-game slate. This isn't somebody we'd be considering for a main slate or anything like that, but at a very cheap price in Showdown where, 2-3 catches could be what puts him in the optimal lineup. He does look decent as a value-saving play on DraftKings. If we're looking at lineups that are expected to be duped the heaviest, most of them not my lineups with the highest projected ROI, particularly on DraftKings, where the number one contest I've built these lineups or simulated them for pays out very, very top heavy. We've got something like 40% of the prize pool going to first place over on DraftKings. Most duped lineup projected here is Daniel Jones in the captain spot with Darius Slayton, Darren Waller, Geno Smith, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Tyler Lockett. So a stack of the passing games on both sides in that lineup is expected to be duped very heavily. And then also, if you guys are looking for other lineups, just interested to see what's duped, these are the other ones that are projected to be coming in, used most often by the field. Only one of these lineups ended up making it into my top 150. And typically, none of the heavily duped lineups are in my top 150 lineups and the top heavy DK payouts. But this one, even though it did have 16 dupes in my run of lineups here, Daniel Jones at captain with DK Metcalf, Darren Waller, Geno Smith, Matt Breida, and Wendell Robinson, it still had a high enough simulated ROI that even despite the dupes, it landed in as being one of my top 150 projected lineups. If we go to the exposures, let's see which individual players we're getting the most of, and then also who it is that we're coming underweight to, as well as the top captain options, and lots of exposure to the quarterbacks. No real surprise there. Generally ends up being the case when I'm running lineups through the Sims. And at least last night for Sunday Night Football ended up being huge because Zach Wilson was my overall most rostered player. And then on FanDuel, I also had like 30% of him the MVP. And that ended up being really profitable, especially when you get a low-owned quarterback, which almost never happens in showdown contests. So neither Geno Smith nor Daniel Jones are going to be contrarian today like Zach Wilson. Each of them project for north of 50% ownership. It's still getting to a good amount of both of them. And Daniel Jones, on the whole, we are overweight too, where Daniel Jones is in, about 80% of the lineups I've built here, where he is projected for about 75% ownership. So a little bit overweight to the field here on Daniel Jones. And then same for Geno Smith, who is also in about 80% of our lineups here. And he's projected for right around 70% ownership. So Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, two most rostered players that I'm getting to here, and also the two most rostered captains. 27% of my lineups have Daniel Jones in the captain, 23% Geno Smith in the captain. Who else are we getting to as captains? DK Metcalf, about even with the field. Any contrarian captains? Let's see. Tyler Lockett, not really. Kenneth Walker, Matt Breida, all about even with the field on these guys, though. Yeah, nothing like crazy contrarian at captain, but let's see some of the flex plays. Anything contrarian or anything else that stands out here? As far as flex players, we are overweight to Kenneth Walker by a decent amount, project for 34% ownership, getting him in north of 50% of lineups. So Kenneth Walker looks like a really good flex play for tonight's slate. As far as Let's see. Are there any really low-owned pieces we're getting to here? Wendell Robinson is the player with the least amount of ownership in the flex spot that we're getting exposure to. And I do think he's a really interesting boom-bust type play for tonight. Last week, he's making a season debut for the Giants. He was great in his rookie season prior to tearing his ACL, so he was on a snap count. But he was getting targeted nearly every single play that he was on the field with the Giants. And also, he looked to have some explosiveness there, looked to be healthy coming back from the ACL injury. So I expect his workload to go up. And with that being the case, fairly cheap price point on Wendell Robinson, only project for 13% ownership. He looks like a good way to differentiate some lineups. And then Gary Brightwell, about even with the fields here, but still, if you're looking for like a super, super cheap punt play, I think Gary Brightwell makes some sense. He was in 15% of my top lineups here. Players that I am underweight to. Underweight to Graham Gano as a kicker, only getting to 6% exposure to him. Jackson Smith-Njigba also coming in underweight to the field on him. And he was a really well-regarded rookie coming into the year for fantasy purposes. He was drafted fairly highly in best ball, like 6th, 7th round pick. And he just hasn't produced to this point. I know he had the wrist injury, which maybe that has been something that's impacted him, but he's going to be somewhat popular for today, and fairly underweight to the field on him. Also underweight to Jason Myers. So kickers on both sides of the game, Graham Gano and Jason Myers, underweight to both of them. And then also underweight to the field on Jalen Hyatt, although not anything crazy there because he's not projected for all that much ownership. So that is a roundup of the DK slate, top players to get to, top captains, top overall projected lineup. So let's do the same for FanDuel now. We also have Owner's Box supported in here. If you guys haven't checked out Owner's Box, another site that we are partnering with for this season. So build out the FanDuel lineups to see what shows up there. And as I usually do while we're building these, I check to see what the payout structure is of the big contest on FanDuel so that I know what percentage payout to first to set the sims to when we simulate the lineups. And yeah, once again, FanDuel not super top heavy. I do like that there's a differentiation in between the FanDuel and DraftKings contest for Showdown this year. So if you guys like really top heavy payouts, you can go check out DraftKings. If you like the flatter tournaments, FanDuel only paying out 20% to first place, still 200K to first place over on FanDuel. So it's a good amount, but not quite as top heavy as what DraftKings is. So we got the lineups in here from the contest generator, simulating now with the 20% to first place. And then we'll find out what looks different on FanDuel relative to DraftKings. So one thing I assume is with the slightly flatter payout structure, generally going to be getting to more of the chalk over on FanDuel. And not that the DraftKings lineups were crazy contrarian today, but still, even FanDuel I expect to be a little bit more chalky, favoriting the top 150. So best overall lineup by Sim ROI. There are two that are quite a bit higher than the rest of the lineups I built here. This one at a 197.6 Sim ROI. This one at 194.2. And there's a pretty big drop off to get to the third lineup. But Kenneth Walker in the MVP spot with Graham Gano, the Seahawks defense, Geno Smith, and Matt Breida. And then this one is Daniel Jones in the MVP spot with Kenneth Walker, Wendell Robinson, Darren Waller, and Darius Slayton in the flex spots. See what's projected to be heavily duped on FanDuel. And see, one thing you'll see is the difference with FanDuel with the top heavy payout structure compared to DraftKings is we have more of these heavily duped lineups that are projected really well from a fantasy standpoint, making it into those lineups. But I have a feeling if I was playing in a contest that was more top heavy payouts and was changing the sims to 30% ROI to first place, these lineups probably wouldn't be projecting nearly as well from an ROI standpoint. But this lineup here is expected to be duped the heaviest by the field. Daniel Jones, Darren Waller, Matt Breida, Darius Slayton, and DK Metcalf currently project to be the most duped lineup on the entire slate. Now, with that said, even this lineup expected to be heavily duped did make it into the top 150, 53.4% Sim ROI, despite all the dupes, and that is Daniel Jones, Darren Waller, Geno Smith, Jason Myers, and Darius Slayton in that one. Player exposures. Let's see what we're getting to. And it is a lot of Daniel Jones and Geno Smith in the MVP. They are making up 3/4 of our lineups in the MVP spot, which I assume means that we're not getting very much exposure to anybody else in that spot. But overall here, yeah, Geno Smith is in 80% of our lineup. So coming in overweight to the field on Geno Smith. Daniel Jones, he's in 75% of our lineup. So we are overweight to the field on both quarterbacks, on both sites. That's where the lineups are primarily being built around. As for MVP options that are not Daniel Jones or Geno Smith, if you guys want to be a little bit more contrarian at your MVP spot, We are getting to 15% of Kenneth Walker, which actually is overweight to the field. Now we're starting to do the math in our heads, right? If we had 75% of the quarterbacks and then 15% of Kenneth Walker, we're really running out of spots to get other MVPs in here. Some exposure to Matt Breida, but underweight to the field. Some exposure to DK Metcalf, also underweight to the field. So it's primarily just Kenneth Walker who are overweight to in that spot, and then Geno Smith and Daniel Jones. Other players we're getting to here, even on FanDuel, Gary Brightwell popping up in lineup. So he's a contrarian option that certainly makes some sense to get to. Getting to him in 28% of lineups, getting to more of the kickers over on FanDuel. Both Graham Gano and Jason Myers are showing up in lineups here. 26% of Jason Myers, 23.3% of Graham Gano. So quite a bit more popular for them in our lineups on FanDuel than they were on DraftKings. Let's see if anything else stands out here. Will Dissly, we're getting to. So it's funny. I was here looking like a fool because I had said that I thought our FanDuel lineups would be a little bit more chalky than DraftKings. Not the case. We got Will Dissly in 15% of lineups, only 4% projected ownership. And then overweight to Wendell Robinson, 11%. So actually fairly contrarian looking FanDuel lineups. Who are we underweight to? Once again, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Unfair to say that we're underweight to Geno Smith and Daniel Jones because we're underweight to them in the flex spot, but well overweight in the captain spot, or I should MVP spot on FanDuel. So overweight to them on the whole, but underweight to Jackson Smith and Jigba, underweight to DK Metcalf, underweight to Tyler Lockett. So it's funny. We're getting to a lot of the quarterbacks, getting to the kickers, getting to the running backs, wide receivers, less so. So I guess that means I'm going to be rooting for running. Well, not that it's that crazy either, but going to be rooting for Daniel Jones to be getting a lot of rushing yards and potentially score a rushing touchdown. And then same for Geno Smith. Let's go for the tush push, 1 yard touchdown runs for the Nuts today. Because that looks like that's going to be the rooting interest. But anyway, that is going to do it for me today, guys. I hope you found this video helpful. Went over some top projected lineups, top values, top captains, MVPs, players to come underweight to the field to. If you like this content, follow me on Twitter, follow us on the YouTube channel, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. Appreciate you guys a whole bunch. And if you want to sign up for a football package, which includes all the data and tools I just showed on screen, there's a link included below for you to sign up. Good luck tonight, guys. Hope you all make some money for Monday Night Football. See you back here on Thursday for the Thursday Night Football game.